What a weekend it was in BYU sports. One player dismissed from the school and his football program. One player lost for the season that might be the single most important player to the basketball program. And we lost one of the all-time great behind-the-scenes stars of BYU football. We're discussing all of it on a live edition of Locked On Cougars.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. I'm Jake Hatch, 14-year credentialed media member at BYU, your resident expert and insiders, your host here on the show. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And more importantly, thank you for making all of us folks over at Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. All right. Heavy weekend for BYU fans, and we're going to get into all of it. And I want you guys to sound off. If you're watching this live, drop your comments in the comments section on YouTube. If you're watching this after the fact in our on-demand features, which are free and available wherever you get your podcast, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, whatever you utilize, weigh in with your thoughts, social media, email, comments, whatever you got. I appreciate any and all support. Coming up on today's show, talking about Parker Kingston, the situation there, and the strong stand that BYU took with regards to his standing. Then we're going to talk about Richie Saunders, what he means to the BYU basketball program is he will no longer be suiting up as a BYU Cougar, at least in terms of playing for BYU anymore. And then we'll talk about the late Patti Edwards, one of the all-timers. And we need to discuss her impact for BYU athletics. We'll get to all of it ahead on today's show. And it's all brought to you by our friends over at Mazda. They put the same drive into every single detail, wins to find the moment, putting in the work. That defines you. Stay tuned for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward segment. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. All right, so if you missed it over the weekend, and I'm sure a number of you did not, BYU made very clear that they are not going to tolerate what is happening with this football program right now, and that is 2 straight off seasons marred by sexual assault allegations. Obviously, last season's a little bit different. A civil complaint, a civil lawsuit filed against former BYU quarterback Jake Retzloff that was settled out of court. He decided that he was not willing to abide by what was reported to be a 7-game suspension to continue playing for BYU football. Therefore, he withdrew from school, enrolled at Tulane, and went on to have a pretty marvelous season for the Tulane Green Wave. This offseason gets absolutely marred by first-degree felony allegations of sexual assault rape in the case of Parker Kingston. He made his first court appearance on Friday, posted bail at $100,000, $10,000 of it in cash to get himself out of jail down there in the St. George area in 5th District Court. We'll have another court appearance upcoming. And BYU, as I kind of reiterate the point here, I thought took a very strong stand as to how they're handling this situation by essentially, and not essentially, no, they said it straight out. Parker Kingston is no longer a student at Brigham Young University, and he's no longer a member of the BYU football program. I'm not going to conflate and try and compare and contrast the two different situations. I'm just going to simply say, I appreciate the fact that BYU's taking a strong stand here. No matter how much it hurts for a guy like Parker Kingston, this cannot continue to happen in the BYU football program. Simply put, it's a really, really horrific look for a football program that prides itself on standing for more than just being a football team. They stand for a program that represents a worldwide faith, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and it's supposed to stand for more than just wins and losses on the field. And the situation at hand here is I appreciate how BYU is taking a stand on saying we're not going to tolerate this. Last year, like I said, civil lawsuit, a little different circumstance, and BYU tried to show as much leniency as they could to Jake Retzloff, understanding the predicament he found himself in. And they essentially said, hey, 7-game suspension. This year, this one's a whole different thing. When it comes to the honor code, if you break the law, you're running afoul of the honor code, not to mention the fact that sexual assault allegations obviously run afoul of the honor code. And Parker Kingston finds himself in legal purgatory and could be, if things are proven to be, like the jury finds him guilty, be facing years behind bars. That's how serious a situation this is for the BYU football program. And that's why I believe that they took as strong a stand as they did and very, very quickly saying, You're no longer a student here. You're no longer a member of the football program. And as I said on Friday's edition of the podcast, the last show that I did before I left for Las Vegas, there are no winners in this situation. You feel for the alleged victim in this circumstance. You feel for Parker, and you feel for the BYU football program because it's a black eye across the board here, and it's horrific. Sexual assault can have long-reaching and lifelong ramifications for the perpetrator, for the victim, all kinds of stuff. So that's why I can appreciate the fact that BYU stepped up and said, enough's enough. We're not gonna let this be a part of this program. This is a program that's supposed to be a lot more than it is. And I'm assuming, I don't know this for certain. I'm assuming stuff will come out in due time, and I'll be sure to pass along anything I learn. But I'm assuming to be some accountability taken within the BYU football program. What is just Parker Kingston, whether it is for the coaching staff, for the athletic department as a whole, because it's not a good look. I don't need to remind many of you, going back all the way to 2004, that the gang rape allegations that came in the Proton era convened the first ever grand jury in Utah County history. That's the BYU wants zero part of. And that's, they had no option but to make that strong of a stand in this circumstance. So yeah, a couple of you, Alan, I feel bad, Beyonce. Yeah, think about that. He announces a week ahead of this all coming out that he and his girlfriend, now fiance, had gotten engaged. It was supposed to be a feel-good moment. And obviously it was a feel-good moment in the moment. But a week later, he finds himself locked up and facing a judge and having his rights read to him, and understanding that he faces some pretty punitive measures in terms of what he is alleged to have done. And I don't enjoy talking about this stuff. A couple of you said, Jake, you need to let this die. You kind of carried it on throughout the offseason last year. I'm going to report news as it comes, and this is news. And that's why I didn't get a chance, because after I did my show before I left for Las Vegas, then the news from BYU came out in their statement saying that he's no longer a member of this program. I can appreciate the fact that BYU took a strong stand against this and said, enough's enough. We're not dealing with this. We're not gonna tolerate it. And Parker Kingston, sadly, is going to have to deal with this. And question here, a good one for this. Did BYU know about Kingston? Hard to imagine a year-long investigation and no one on the team knew. I had some very surface level talks with people that know more about the legal situation that BYU could have found itself in. And they said if investigators from St. George went to BYU police and said, hey, we need your help looking into this, that doesn't mean that BYU police are going to immediately turn around and tell BYU football, hey, we're looking at this. I'd be hard pressed to think that there wasn't anybody in that locker room who didn't have an idea of something going on, because there had been rumors, apparently, and I was unaware of them, going back to last season. I'll swear on everything I have. I had no idea. This came out of left field for me, as much as it did for many of you. Some people out there on the internet want to claim that there were rumors of this going back to during the middle part of last season. I don't know. If there was, great. I don't like to look around in police blotters for information for this podcast. I'll be very blunt. I just don't think it's a situation that it's unfortunate. And yes, the fact that it went on for almost a year, because the alleged incident happened February 23rd of 2025. So essentially we're a week away from the year-long mark of this investigation. I would have liked to have thought that something would have come out of this, that he would have told somebody or said something. But I also understand that Jake Retzlaff last year, the first person he turned to was his agent. It wasn't his coaches. It wasn't BYU. He turned to his agent. And that's kind of changed in this new age of college football. You guys have agents to represent them. And that, I don't know that that's the case here. Let me be very clear, but there's a whole litany of things that still need to be explained. And I don't know that we're ever going to get full explanation of it, if hopefully that makes sense. So I don't know. And a lot of videos saying that Kingston is their favorite player. Brutal. It comes from M. Morris. Yeah, that's the sad part about this. Parker was a fan favorite, and it's one of those things that a hero has now fallen, and it's a tough lesson for kids to absorb. All right. So That's one of the trifecta of suckitude that I kind of thought about on my drive back from Las Vegas today. That's why I'm doing this show live. I was on my way home from Vegas in a weekend-long cheer competition. So that's leg one. Leg two happens Saturday afternoon. Richie Saunders, done for the season. And let's just put it this way. This is not the way it was supposed to end. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Indeed. Now, workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, your inbox overflowing. I can tell you after a weekend on the road for myself, that's what's happened. In the one position you have to fill still sitting open if you're hiring, that's when the pressure is on and you need the right hire. That is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. They help you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for, skills, expertise, location, and a litany of other features. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you or will be talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes, and do it with Indeed sponsored jobs. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing the candidates who check all the boxes. And all you got to do right now to get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Indeed.com/podcast right now, and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on Locked On Cougars. Indeed.com/podcast. Get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your posting where it needs to be. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire. This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Thank you for being here on Locked On Cougars. And if you are a true everydayer, one who consumes our content all the time, I want you guys to check out our brand new Locked On Cougars Everydayer Club. Go ad-free with the Everydayer Club, plus members-only Discord access service. Join at lockedoncougars.supercast.com. If you want to be a part of the all-access tier, you get free episodes, exclusive episodes, I should say, as well as access to our texting service. It's all available to you by going to lockedoncougars.supercast.com. All right, so Saturday afternoon, I'm sitting in the Orleans Arena. Some pretty incredible memories of watching BYU basketball of yesteryear play in that arena, but cheer routines going on as I was watching my daughter compete with her team. And I'm also on my phone watching BYU basketball take on the Colorado Buffaloes. Now, Saturday afternoon, obviously a big day because Jimmer Fredette was in the house having his jersey unveiling up in the rafters of the Marriott Center. That was a phenomenal moment. But 45 seconds into this game, Richie Saunders tries to go up in the air and make a jump stop, and you see that knee buckle, and down he goes. And you're like, oh, no. And looking back at that moment, I rewound the tape because watching it on my phone so I could rewind a little bit. I got shades of exactly what happened to Dawson Baker earlier this year. Because remember, Dawson Baker down there in Orlando tried to make a jump stop. He saw that knee buckle underneath him. He goes down, and pretty significant damage in Dawson Baker's knee. And I just had, like, when Richie went down, I was like, oh no, that's not good. That is really, really not good, because if there is one guy who is not going to spend time on the court, speaking of going down and get back up and get back after, if at all possible, it's Richie Saunders. And Richie is a phenomenal basketball player. His motor, it's unmatched. I'm telling you, there are very few people in the world of basketball that play with the joy, the energy, the want to that Richie Saunders plays with. And it also helps that he's been blessed with an incredibly quick release, an incredible ability to shoot the three-pointer. And that, combined with the fact that he's 6'5", 6'6", and as a well put together athlete, are reasons why he was on an NBA trajectory and looking like he was going to be taken in the second round of the NBA draft. And that's why I said this is not the way the story should have ended for Richie Saunders. It is there is a situation here that Richie should have been able to go out and have a phenomenal run in the NCAA tournament, no matter how long it went with the BYU basketball program. He gets done with the season, puts out a post thanking BYU fans for all their support over the last 4 years, and then he's off to the NBA. Instead, he's going to be having surgery in due time, and obviously has seen his NBA draft stock probably take a hit here. I'm not saying he's not going to be drafted in the NBA draft, because there may be a team or two out there that have already said, when in doubt, we're taking Richie. Like that's how good of a player he is, and the skills that he boasts are NBA caliber. But it's just, it feels like an unfulfilled story to watch him go out in that circumstance. That's the tough part to stomach about the Richie Saunders experience at BYU. This is a guy who came from the Utah prep ranks, played at Riverton High School, if I recall correctly, then transferred to the vaunted Wasatch Academy down there in Mount Pleasant. And when he committed to BYU, he was a really, really high-level prospect. And there was a lot of excitement about what he could offer to the BYU basketball program. He came in during the tail end of the Mark Pope run, became the consummate sixth man, and pardon my voice here. I was dealing with a cold all weekend while I was in Vegas. But just what he became. Last year, the most improved player in the Big 12, a first-team all-conference player, and went into this year thinking, all right, the 1-2 tandem with him and A.J. DeBonsa, and that was before Robert Wright III was also in the mix here for BYU. The thought was that they were going to kind of be the two linchpins that were going to make this BYU basketball program go, and there were expectations that they could maybe make the Final Four, that they could make it to the Sweet 16. That was the floor, is what A.J. DeBonsa said. And that obviously has to be recalibrated now. Because if you don't recalibrate your expectations for BYU basketball right now, I'm telling you, you're going to be severely disappointed. Because it's more likely right now that BYU goes out in the first weekend of the NCAA tournament than they are to make a deep run. And I'm not saying they couldn't. A.J. DeBonsa, Rob Wright, the rest of the guys on the BYU roster, they're going to have to step up in this circumstance, and they're going to need to find answers. And to lose 4 players a season ending injuries, it's really bad luck. It is. And the thing is, I think there's 6 guys that I usually call it season ending or unavailable this season, because you include KJ Perry, who was ruled ineligible, even though he enrolled at midseason. He's redshirting. The amount of injuries BYU has endured this basketball season, It is some rotten bad luck, and it happens. There are teams who get decimated due to injury, and if there was one person, I'm not saying that A.J. DeBonsa is not indispensable for BYU basketball, because he's not, because Richie is AJ is one thing. He is absolutely incredible. He's a top 5 at the very, very worst NBA draft prospect. I would take him number 1 personally if I had that selection, but Richie is probably the most indispensable player on BYU's roster. His ability to generate extra possessions, his ability just to compete on a play-in, play-out basis, and to make winning basketball plays, that's not easily replaced with BYU's current roster. And it's not, I don't think it's any fault of Kevin Young's or anybody else in and around the BYU basketball program. It is plain old rotten bad luck, and that's why I reiterate the point that it feels like an unfulfilled ending to the Richie Saunders story. And that is the tough part to stomach here, if you're a fan of BYU basketball and the Richie Saunders experience, because Richie was an incredible, incredible human being. He still is an incredible human being. It sounds like I'm writing him off. No, I'm not writing him off in any way, shape, or form. I do think Richie has an NBA future in his career. Guys asking me, will Richie have to go to Europe now? I don't think so. I think Richie will become probably a 2-way player and have to work his way up onto a regular NBA roster, maybe that way. And then what a 2-way player is you're signed by an NBA team, but as a 2-way player, you spend the majority of your time working out with the G League affiliate of said team, and then they can obviously pull you up to the active roster when need be due to roster constraints when a guy's get injured and the like. That's what I think that Richie's future holds here, but he does also have to recover from an ACL injury, and this is happening in mid-February. That's tough, because I think best case scenario is he back by mid-December? Like, we're talking that's 8 months time, and that's kind of on the fast end of ACL reconstruction surgeries. And that's the tough part about this, is you're going to have to hope that he gets back to being who Richie is. And that's what an NBA team is going to have to bet on. And it's difficult. But so now we're going to discuss this more, getting ahead this week, going into the Arizona and Iowa State matchups, and BYU being a wounded animal. We'll talk more about that. And I think you have to recalibrate the whole thought process here of what BYU basketball's expectation level is, because without the third wheel of that big 3, man, it gets a whole lot more difficult for Kevin Young and company to find options to replace. And Alexei Kostic, Tyler Maruss, there's a bunch of dudes on that roster, Moo Davis, that have got to step up now, and they've got to be able to fill that role. It's going to be a team effort because you're not going to replace it with just one guy. Richie, like I said, is so indispensable in a BYU uniform that it is going to take a team-wide effort to try and even approach the replication of what he offered to BYU basketball. But here's sending good healing vibes to Richie, and that he's back on a basketball court very, very soon. And we see him fulfill that destiny of playing in the NBA, because I really do think he has got that in him. And I think that he's still very much going to be an NBA player down the line. All right. Finishing up this show, one of the all-timers that a lot of people maybe didn't realize in the moment, but I think she is getting her due now. Patti Edwards passed away this past weekend, and as the matriarch of modern BYU football, she deserves her laurels as well. Today's show is brought to you by Mazda. This is Mazda's moving the game forward. For those who know it, there's just more to the score than what's on the screen. These are the moments that really kind of remind us of great moments. And I got to give credit to Rob Wright. Richie Saunders goes down injured in that game against Rob Wright, really stepped to the forefront. Those are the moments that remind us what it takes to raise the bar. It's that extra work off the court, dialing in every detail, giving it that extra fire, that grit. And I never model highlights make the real. What it took to get there makes it count, because there's always more to a Mazda. Brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, FanDuel is here for you guys to get you guys taken care of when it comes to the NBA Finals. If you want to experience the NBA Finals live and in person, something I have never even experienced, FanDuel is giving you that chance to turn that dream into reality with their NBA sweepstakes. It works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll be automatically entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for two. That's right. Flights, tickets, the whole experience covered by our friends over at FanDuel. If you are looking at the board and thinking about which team can make it deeper, it's the perfect time to lock in. Like I said, with a futures odds, and now you can always pick. You can not only pick cash, but also get send you to the NBA Finals. Man, I am struggling on that note. But visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Use that profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. We all know how big the finals can be. Play your game with FanDuel. They are the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you for being here on Locked On Cougars and making it your first listen of the day. If you have not subscribed, rated, reviewed the show, if you're watching the show live, I'm going to point right down here. There's a little thumbs up icon. Click it. That's all I'm asking you to do. It helps the algorithm understand that, hey, I'm a Cougar fan. I like this content, and you should share with other Cougar fans. Algorithms are what rule the world, especially when it comes to podcasting these days. And thank you for all of your support. It really does mean the world to me. A lot of you reaching out over the weekend and expressing your condolences on the situation down in Las Vegas with the sister cheer gym of my daughters. So thank you to all of you for your support. All right. So over the weekend, in the trifecta of suctitude that I'm dubbing this weekend for BYU basketball, we lost the matriarch of modern BYU football, and that is Patti Edwards. And if you do not know who Patti Edwards is, you did not pay close enough attention to BYU football and their rise under Lavelle Edwards. Lavelle obviously took the headlines, 250-plus career wins, the 1984 national championship, the quarterback carousel of greatness. BYU was QBU for a long time, and in fact, is still one of the quarterback universities out there in college football, in large part to what Lavelle established over 50 years ago now. Well, behind the scenes, Patti Edwards and Lavelle acknowledged, he said, every success essentially I had with BYU football is because of the unending support that my wife and children gave me while I led this BYU football program. And Patti Edwards, she is a legend in so many different ways. And I would encourage you, if you do not know enough about the situation with Patti Edwards and what she did behind the scenes, talk to people who knew her, because she was absolutely an incredibly kind human being. I only had brief opportunities to ever interact with her, but she was very kind when I did get the opportunity. And I can tell you what she did for BYU football behind the scenes really kind of made things go. She created a coach, like a lot of players at BYU, obviously serving missions for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They come home and they're encouraged to get married. When Lavelle embraced it, he wasn't a coach who was going to say, no, you're not getting married. We're going to focus on football. He encouraged his guys to get on with life, get married. And Patti understood that these wives of these players, well, it's a pretty lonely life being a football wife. And she understood that. She created a network of these young wives and mothers and had nights where they would all get together and just do things together. She actually established it nationwide. She kind of expanded it out for football wives across the country. And that's just like a small snippet of what Patti Edwards meant to the BYU football program. And I love the fact that she lived a full life and did a lot of things. A lot of people say that one of her final acts before she passed, and a very happy reunion with her late husband, Lavelle, in the great hereafter, obviously was a thing. United. It's a phenomenal thing. But she reportedly had a conversation with Kalani Sitake and expressed what he to BYU football during the span when he was considering leaving for Penn State. I don't necessarily know that her conversation was the reason why Kalani Sitake decided to stick it out and stay with the BYU football program, but it sure didn't hurt. Patti Edwards is an incredibly unsung hero in BYU sports history. Because like I said, 50 plus years ago, who would have thought that BYU football would become what it is? Because the first 50 years of BYU football, I could go chronicle that history if you want. It was awful. We're talking the program was just mired in lower half of their conference for 50 years. Lavelle came in and understood that, hey, I got to try something different if I want to succeed as the head coach at this school that has had essentially zero success on the football field. They had instances here and there of success, but no sustained success. So Lavelle came in with a revolutionary idea that, you know what? We're not going to run the wishbone. We're not going to run the veer option. We're not going to run the I formation that all these Big 10 and Big 8 schools are doing, and what the Pac-10 at the time is doing. We're going to throw the ball. And he brought in coaches and players that really revolutionized college football. And the whole way around it, the whole way that Lavelle went about his 29 years as head coach was Patti Edwards right there along for the ride. She was at BYU events after he passed. She was seen all the time because BYU is in her blood. And I think it's in all of our blood that are watching this podcast. I'm talking about it because I grew up a big fan of this university and its football program. I don't hide that fact. I went to school there. And Patti Edwards deserves all the laurels. She is an incredibly kind human being, as I said, and what she means to BYU sports, I don't think can be oversold in so many different ways. Yeah, her husband has the hardware and took a lot of the glory that came from the successes over 3+ decades of him being associated with the BYU football program. But behind every great man, I can say it about myself, behind every great man is an even greater wife. And that's the incredible part about this is we've got a person like Patti Edwards to celebrate on this weekend. It's always tough to watch legends like that pass along, but I appreciate the fact that in the great hereafter, her and her husband are now reunited because she missed Lavelle a lot. It was very clear that she had done a lot in her life, and like I said, it was a crazy weekend in BYU sports. So rest in peace to Patti Edwards. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the Edwards family at this time, and the Edwards family will never be forgotten around BYU sports. Obviously, with Lavelle's name up on the football stadium out there, that will always endure. But Patti Edwards deserves to be honored just as much as anybody in and around BYU football. So that is going to do it for this edition of the show. I had a really, really long drive back from Las Vegas, got caught up in some traffic in southern Utah, had a life flight helicopter that shut down the freeway on I-15. So yeah, I had a longer drive than normal home, had a lot of time to think, and said, you know what, as soon as I get home, we are going to sit down and we are going to hash it out here. And I really do appreciate all the support you guys give us, even like NR Spencer. Look at this. Thanks for the great job you do, Jake. Being a Ute fan, wish we had you. Hey, I've done Locked On Utes at one point in my career, and maybe at some point I'll I can kick JT. I'm not kicking JT out of that chair. I actually helped JT get into that chair, but I love doing what I do. And NR Spence, thank you for coming over to a BYU podcast and saying some kind things. I really do appreciate you being a part of it. But big thank you to all of you for your comments, your concern, all of your support of this, because this only exists because you guys. It really is. I don't hide the fact that I'm lucky to do what I do every single day, talking BYU sports and in sports radio, doing more than that. I really do appreciate all of you for all of your continued support. And I'll be back bright and early. Drake Toll and myself, we're going to be talking about some of the same topics, but also, is there a light at the end of the tunnel of this weekend that was not so good for BYU sports? We discussed that on a crossover edition. That'll be up for you guys bright and early on Tuesday morning. So as always, thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you're watching this on YouTube, we're going to send you over to the first ever Locked On live college sports channel. Let's get more BYU and other content out there. It's on the Locked On Sports Network. And if you're listening to this on audio, please subscribe, rate, and review. Make your second listen today. Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin. And until tomorrow, everybody, have a great rest of your evening right here. And thanks you for being an everydayer on Locked On Cougars.